In this case, prosecutors alleged that a man was trapped inside a suitcase, left there overnight, and died while begging to be let out. What the jury had to decide was simple. Was this an accident or a murder? This is the trial of Sarah Boone, accused of killing her partner, George Torres, by zipping him inside a suitcase and leaving him there to die. What follows are key moments from the actual trial, using original courtroom audio exactly as the jury heard it.
Ladies and gentlemen, what the evidence in this case is going to show you is that this defendant zipped poor making George Torres shot in a suitcase. She was able to do this because at the time of his death, he only weighed 103 pounds. And she did this with the malicious intent to punish him. And then she went up to sleep and left him to take his final breaths on this earth alone. How many breaths those were, we don't know.
Before any evidence was shown, the judge made it clear how the trial would proceed.
Testimony. So court's going to exercise its discretion for those reasons. You can talk about it. You can talk about it that she was a victim. You can talk about some incidences may have happened, but I'm not going to allow the photographs at this point in time for those reasons, for your utilization of them in opening statements. Any questions or clarifications with regards to the court's ruling? State.
No, Your Honor.
Defense.
No, sir.
All right,
The defense then presented a very different interpretation of what happened.
We're going to ask you to conduct this role. We find Sarah Boone not guilty because she was justified in the force that she used to defend herself.
The prosecution's case centered on physical evidence and where George Torres took his final breaths.
George Torres took his last panicked breaths in this box. The medical examiner explained to us that with each breath George Torres took in, there was less oxygen in this box. George Torres was murdered in this box.
Jurors were then instructed on the exact legal standard they had to apply to that evidence.
The law informs us that to prove the crime of second-degree murder, the state must prove the following three elements beyond a reasonable doubt. I think it's important to stop right here. This sentence right here is telling us what has to be proven in order for the crime of second-degree murder to be for the defendant to be found guilty in this case.
As the argument continued, the tension inside the courtroom became visible.
An objection from the defense attorney there as the prosecution delivered its closing argument. I would imagine it was about the comment over George not being able to get his arm out that we just heard Mr. Cacciatore make. It's been an emotional closing argument so far for the prosecution, and specifically for the family members of George Torres who are inside the courtroom or were inside the courtroom when the prosecution showed that suitcase video again. Looks like that sidebar has wrapped up, and we'll see the judge's response to that objection.
By the second day of trial, the court returned to the record and continued hearing evidence.
I do.
Good morning, ma'am. Can you state your full name and date of birth for the record for me?
Sarah Boone, 10/10/17.
etc.
Ms. Boone is seated at counsel's table wearing a black jacket and a white multicolored shirt. Looks like some splotching on it. She is in custody. However, she's not wearing any restraints. So we will be standing when our jury panel enters and exits. The parties may approach.
In closing, the prosecution left the jury with one final question.
4.5 years after the fact, it's time to come up with a new story. But ladies and gentlemen, I submit to you that the truth does not change. The facts do not change. The videos do not change. And on any version of events that the defendant has given, they all add up to the fact that there is absolutely no doubt that she is guilty of murder.
Courtroom footage tells a different story than any film ever could. No soundtrack, no narration over testimony, just the record as it happened. If this format helps you understand real cases more clearly, leave a comment, subscribe, and join us for more courtroom moments, straight from the source.